The reality of Paul Newman and Brandon Dew Wild's romance. On April 9, 1942, Brandon Dew Wild was born in Brooklyn, New York, as Andre Brandon Dew Wild. From a young age, Brandon was surrounded by the performing arts. His mother, Eugenia Wilson Dew Wild, was a theater actress who worked part-time, and his father, Frederick A. Fritz Dew Wild, was an actor and stage manager for Broadway productions. Brandon's early passion in performing was nurtured by the supportive environment of his theatrical family. Brandon's exposure to the arts flourished after the family moved to Baldwin, Long Island. Brandon debuted on Broadway at the age of 7 in the play, The Member of the Wedding by Carson McCullers. He became the youngest actor to win the Donaldson Award for his depiction of John Henry West, which was praised by critics. Due to the play's popularity, Brandon reprised his role in a 1952 Fred Zinnemann film adaptation. He won a Golden Globe for Most Promising Newcomer for his role in the movie. In 1953, Brandon played Joey Starrett in George Stevens's renowned Western Shane, which became his most famous role. One of the most iconic lines in movie history was his sincere request that Shane return. Brandon was one of the youngest nominees in the Best Supporting Actor category when he was nominated for an Academy Award at the age of 11. This part cemented his position as a Hollywood rising star. After being successful in Shane, Brandon made the move to television, where he starred from 1953 to 1954 in the ABC sitcom Jimmy. They further endeared him to audiences by showcasing his charm and ability. He had appearances in a number of television shows during the 1950s and 1960s, such as Wagon Train, Alfred Hitchcock Presents, and The Virginia, showcasing his versatility in a variety of genres. As Brandon grew older, he looked for parts that showcased his development as an actor. His journey into more adult parts began in 1959 when he acted in Blue Denim, when he played a teenager struggling with complicated concerns. He kept pushing himself with roles in movies like HUD 1963, starring Paul Newman, and All Fall Down 1962, in which he portrayed the younger brother of Warren Beatty's character. Brandon demonstrated his versatility and depth as an actor in HUD by playing Lonnie Bannon, a young man torn between moral quandaries. Brandon was passionate about music in addition to acting. Graham Parsons, a guitarist and friend who was well known for his work with the Byrds and the Flying Burrito Brothers, was his collaborator. Parsons' band, the International Submarine Band, helped Brandon in his recording sessions as he pursued his dream of becoming a musician. Despite not being commercially successful, these musical ventures demonstrated Brandon's diverse range of artistic interests. Later, Parsons and Emmylou Lou Harris co-wrote the song In My Hour of Darkness, which honors Brandon's untimely passing in the opening stanza. In his short but colorful life, Brandon Dew Wild was married twice and had a son. In 1963, he wed Susan M. Ma, a writer, in his first marriage. Wild was just 21 years old at the time. Ma was a writer who shared his artistic sensibility and admiration for the arts, and he was already a well-known actor with a bright future. Mutual respect and a desire to create a life based on emotional depth and artistic expression characterized their union at first. They welcomed a son, Jesse Dew Wild, into the world together, giving Brandon's life even more significance. Dew Wild's fatherhood was a major turning point in his life, and he was committed to his job as a parent in spite of the responsibilities of his acting profession and the pressures of early celebrity. But the pressures of keeping a marriage intact in the public eye, along with the difficulties of having two young people pursuing demanding careers, took their toll. In 1969, Brandon and Susan got divorced after 6 years of marriage. despite the breakup, they kept in touch with each other through their kid and continued to co-parent Jesse. Du Wild and Janice Jarrow fell in love once more in the early 1970s, at a time when Brandon was looking for both personal and professional rebirth. Janice, a former flight attendant and aspiring actress, brought stability and a new feeling of companionship into his life. The pair married in April 1972 after their relationship blossomed rapidly. In the months after their marriage, Brandon appeared to be genuinely happy, according to friends and family, who described him as more composed and upbeat about the future. Unfortunately, they would only have a heartbreakingly short time together as husband and wife. On July 6, 1972, just 3 months after getting married, Brandon D., the 30-year-old child, perished in an automobile accident in Denver, Colorado. In addition to devastating his friends, family, and admirers, his sudden passing ended a fresh chapter in his life that had just begun. Even though his second marriage was brief, his loved ones thought he had discovered in Janice a companion who genuinely understood and stood by him. How Brandon D. Wild attempted to woo Paul Newman. Two men, each exceptional in their own right, met in the golden haze of the early 1960s in Hollywood, when appearances were crucial and secrets were kept hidden behind the velvet curtains of studio offices. Their encounter was tinged with both admiration and unspoken yearning. One was Paul Newman, the blue-eyed symbol of American manhood, a rising star of carefree cool who continued the rebellious tradition started by Marlon Brando and James Dean. The other was Brandon Du Wild, the child actor who had captivated American audiences as the wide-eyed, serious Joey and Shane, and who had developed into a restless, artistically inclined, and remarkably sensitive young man. Du Wild was no longer the boy from the prairie with unkempt hair by the time he was in his early 20s. He had assumed more mature roles, most notably in HUD 1963 with Newman, where their on-screen chemistry was as nuanced as their real-life relationship. Soft-spoken and emotionally astute, Brandon held Newman in higher regard than just as a colleague. Paul's talent and movie star aura weren't the only things that impressed him. He had captured his attention. Newman's tough self-assurance and his blend of friendliness and distance sparked something inside Dale that he had never really accepted. Their interaction was evident on set. Then, in his late 30s, Newman observed Brandon's focus, the way he remained between takes. Silently observing Paul, Brandon would ask him cryptic, elliptical questions about acting, performance philosophy, and occasionally even marriage and faithfulness. Ever the professional, Newman would respond politely but evasively, maybe seeing the underlying message but deciding not to break it. Even Brandon might not have been clear about how he felt. He was a young man who wore fragility like a second skin, having grown up in the harsh limelight of child stardom and maturing in a time that was intolerant of overt displays of queerness. He frequently appeared to vacillate between worlds, yearning for closeness but being afraid of being seen. A conflict that many actors of the day who led double lives under the spotlight of fame were familiar with. There are several rumors that have never been verified and are consistently refuted. During a break in production, Brandon once invited Newman to a late-night party at his rented bungalow off Sunset Boulevard. Although it was supposed to be a small gathering, not many people ever turned up. The evening ultimately came down to the two of them, whether by purpose or by accident. Brandon was a guitarist. With a soft, soulful touch, he handed Paul a drink, possibly bourbon, which Newman took with moderation. As was often the case with Brandon, the conversation veered into philosophy, and he talked candidly about loneliness, celebrity, and the aspects of himself that he felt he could never share. In private memoirs, industry insiders half told stories, and the voids in letters and interviews The moment that followed has been the subject of countless conjectures. Some claim that Brandon hesitantly touched Paul's hand in an attempt to gauge his response. Others claim that his bravado evaporated in the tense quiet between them as he leaned in too closely before pulling away. It's possible that Newman, who is polite but firm, gently guided the discussion back to neutral territory, opting for kindness over conflict. He had been married to Joanne Woodward for a long time, and their marriage was one of the most solid in Hollywood, a rare combination. For Paul, it might have been just a minor detail in a convoluted friendship. It stayed with Brandon. Despite being subtle, the emotional gamble he took was both freeing and traumatic. He had ventured for a glimpse of time to be real in a world that provided him nothing but masks and mirrors. And although that didn't result in the connection he had hoped for, it confirmed something inside of him. That longing might be lovely even in the absence of fulfillment, and that desire was not shameful. In 1972, Brandon DeWilde lost his life tragically in an automobile accident at the age of 30. Beneath the legend of old Hollywood, whatever truth existed between him and Paul Newman perished along with him. Perhaps it never happened, but Newman never discussed any such occurrence in public. Or maybe it was just one of countless private, loving interactions that go unnoticed and are only recalled in pieces. Emotions and silent moments of what could have been. The talented and endearing young actor Brandon DeWilde, who gained notoriety as a child star in movies like Shane, led a life that was both extremely public and extremely private. Despite spending a large portion of his career in the spotlight, there were still rumors, whispered tales, and mystery surrounding his personal life that only those closest to him may have been aware of. His complex relationship with the renowned Paul Newman is one such tale that is rarely spoken aloud. In the glitzy Hollywood circles of the 1950s and 60s, prudence was crucial and image was everything. According to rumors, Brandon had a great deal of respect and more for Paul Newman. For the younger actor, Newman, who was already well known and a symbol of refined sophistication, was both an inspiration and a source of interest. Some reports and first-hand stories claim that Brandon did more than merely adore Paul. He made a conscious effort to gain his love and attention in modest but purposeful ways. A delicate ballet of charm, sensitivity, and youthful daring characterized Brandon's attempts to woo Paul. He was aware that Newman had a captivating presence, distinguished by his unflappable charm, piercing blue eyes, and air of indestructible coolness. However, Brandon was no typical admirer due to his own outstanding appearance and sensitive personality. In an age when such matters were shrouded in secrecy, he understood the importance of subtle gestures, the kind of modest messages that may express interest without overt declarations. Talking about their shared interests, acting, art, and the difficulties of celebrity was one way Brandon attempted to get Paul's attention. Brandon had a talent for giving people a sense of being heard and noticed. Additionally, he would listen intently and participate in conversations with Paul that enabled Newman to share his aspirations and frustrations. There was a hint of something deeper in these intimate encounters. Brandon thought Paul would see this as an implicit invitation to closeness. Brandon would place himself in a strategic position next to Paul in social situations, smiling warmly or giving him a brief handshake. Brief but deeply meaningful moments. Under the pretense of casual remarks, he would occasionally offer discreet compliments, commend Paul's most recent film, express admiration for his charitable endeavors, or make subtle observations about Paul's effortless elegance. Brandon's seduction was more than simply words. Each phrase was carefully chosen to convey the message, "I see you in a world where being truly seen could be rare." It has to do with presence, too. He would dress with a subtle elegance, frequently choosing outfits that highlighted his young charm without appearing overly ambitious. He drew people in with an openness, kindness, and a hint of vulnerability that was like an implicit invitation. For Brandon, emotional integrity was just as important to seduction as physical attractiveness. Beneath these endeavors, however, was contemporary interest. Both men worked in a field and a society that discouraged discussing such private issues. Any deeper relationship had to stay concealed, secret, and a whispered potential rather than an open reality because of the pressure to maintain a public facade. The bittersweet realization that what he sought might never be entirely accepted or publicly returned permeated Brandon's efforts. Even still, others who saw these encounters could sense Brandon's silent yearning. A young man striving for authenticity in an artificial environment, seeking to close the distance between friendship and something greater, between admiration and affection. It's unclear if Paul Newman completely comprehended or responded to these subtle advances. However, it is evident that Brandon Du Wild's attempts to establish a connection were sincere, brave, and representative of his nuanced, fervent personality. Ultimately, this little-known aspect of Brandon's life captures the larger hardships faced by many performers in his time. Under the watchful eye of a society that isn't yet prepared to embrace their truths, they must navigate their wants in a culture of secrecy while yearning for real connection. Brandon's tale serves as a moving reminder of the humanity hidden beneath the glitz and the quiet struggles waged behind the scenes, particularly his covert attempts to entice and establish a connection with Paul Newman. Brandon D. Wild's promising life and career ended abruptly and tragically on July 6, 1972, when he was involved in a catastrophic car accident in Colorado. Du Wild had been in Colorado at the time for work-related reasons, having accepted a role in a stage adaptation of the well-known drama Butterflies Are Free. The show was taking place in Denver's famous Elite Theater, which has hosted numerous well-known performers and shows throughout the years. Du Wild was attempting to further establish himself in the live theater world after making the shift from child star to serious adult actor. His participation in the play was a part of an ongoing endeavor to embrace the more intimate and challenging art of stage acting and broaden his repertoire beyond film and television. Du Wild was sadly died in a car accident in the adjacent community of Lakewood, Colorado, while he was staying in the Denver area during the run of the play. When the tragedy happened, he was driving a camper van, which is frequently utilized for practical travel accommodations during lengthy regional concerts or road excursions. The van drove off the road for unknown reasons. The van then rolled onto its side after colliding with a guard post and a parked truck. The Wild was trapped inside the car due to the impact's force and location. After arriving on the site, emergency personnel attempted to free him from the twisted wreckage. His injuries were so severe that they overshadowed any attempts to save his life. Medical staff battled to stabilize Du Wild after he was taken to St. Anthony Hospital in Denver. But he had endured a great deal of trauma. His numerous injuries included a shattered leg, a fractured neck, and a broken back, all of which were consistent with the crash's horrific nature. Brandon Du Wild was declared deceased that night. At just 30 years old, he was still in the peak of his life and might yet be in his prime as a mature actor. Fans and co-workers alike were saddened to learn of his passing. Many had witnessed him develop on TV, from a talented child star to a competent adult performer with a unique and sensitive approach. After his sudden passing, Brandon Du Wild was first buried in Hollywood, California, a suitable place for someone whose career had been closely linked to the film industry. He had spent a large portion of his career in Hollywood. His first interment there was a final link to the business that had both developed and appreciated his skills. From his breakthrough performance in Shane at the age of 11 to his roles in critically acclaimed movies and television shows during the 1950s and 1960s. But Du Wild's parents decided to have his remains transferred at some point following his burial. They had their son re-entered at Pinellan Memorial Park in Farmingdale, New York, because they wanted him to lie nearer to their own house and family history. This Long Island cemetery gave his loved ones a more intimate and convenient place to lay, enabling them to pay him more frequent visits and keep a physical link to his memory. The relocation was a reflection of the intense affection and ongoing sorrow of his family, who had supported his career since he was a young boy and now wanted to preserve his memory near home. In addition to being a personal loss for his loved ones, Brandon de Wilde's passing was also a cultural loss. He had gained praise from critics and won over audiences as a performer because of his extraordinary emotional depth and natural ability to portray vulnerability. Although his career was already notable, it had the potential to be considerably more successful before the accident that killed him ended it. A lingering feeling of what might have been a life full of artistic promise and human complexity was left behind by his unexpected death. Sadly came to an end too soon.